Hi, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Rachel Baker, and before founding Tejo, I found my own skincare line, but I found getting online conversions really tough because customers would visit the site and didn't understand why a product was right for them or if it would work for their skin. Augmented reality services or virtual makeup try-on didn't really help me because it didn't explain why a product was right for them. And so essentially what I would do is it would make people look good in a selfie, but not necessarily in real life. So I decided to create Tejo.ca, a software service that helps brands increase their customer loyalty and lifetime value by helping consumers buy the right products for their skin. Essentially, what we do is we use facial recognition to analyze a customer's face, determine which products will suit them best, and then show them what those products can look like and what they'll do for them. And we are incredibly indie brand friendly. We host regular webinar sessions like this, and we also post blogs to help indie brands. You can sign up for our mailing list to get notified of our other events like this one if you go to tejo.ca. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Gia. She is the founder of Hayes CPG, a supply chain consultancy company dedicated to helping emerging beauty brands navigate everything from operations to fulfillment to inventory planning. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to hopefully make retail less daunting for indie founders.
Yeah, so I guess my first question I have for you is, what does a brand need to consider before working with a mass retailer?
So if I were an indie beauty founder and, I was approached by my first mass retailer, or maybe, it's another retail partnership, I would ask myself two core questions. So one is, do I have the capital to support inventory, marketing, and sell-through? So it's incredibly important that you're well stocked and you avoid stockouts as much as possible. And you can support inventory as much as you can because you want to be able to fulfill purchase orders as you receive them and avoid shipping late. Keep in mind also that retailers will want you to meet certain sell-through benchmarks. So, maybe a Target, for example, might want you to be able to sell through 1 unit per SKU per store. And you need to be able to support that sell-through with marketing, brand awareness, and a lot of times it's going to come out of your pocket and not the retailer. The second question is, do I have the bandwidth, the team, and the infrastructure in place to be able to support a retail partnership? So do you have a 3PL partner that you trust and you work well with that will be able to handle your retail shipments, that understand your packouts? Do you have the team in place, or do you have the bandwidth personally to be able to monitor your retail orders on a day-to-day basis and make sure that you're shipping on time and accurately? So those are some very important things to consider.
So while in the agreement stage with the buyer, what questions should a brand ask?
First, you want to understand what channels they're going to be selling you on. So the typical channels are dropship, retail, so brick and mortar, and online. So once you have that understanding, also get an understanding of what their distribution strategy is for you. So sometimes retailers might launch you online first, or maybe in a handful of brick and mortar locations so that they can test your brand and see how it sells. So once again, like I said, supporting sell-through is going to be very important in this stage because you want to ultimately be able to prove your sell-through and then expand into more locations or other channels with your retail partner. Once you have that understanding, get a launch timeline from them. When do they want to launch you? What season do they want to launch you? What is the timeline for launching you? Like, what is the average setup timeline, and how much of each SKU do they plan on ordering for launch? And the third is shipping terms and payment terms. So a lot of, I think, indie founders, new founders that have never worked in retail don't really realize this, but you can negotiate your shipping terms. So that's determining which party is going to pay for shipping. So a lot of times retailers will actually cover the cost of shipping, but you do want to have that in writing somewhere when you are talking through your terms with them. And then for payment terms, average payment terms are net 60, which means that you're going to be paid 60 days after your order ships. sometimes depending on, the brand's cash flow or, other factors, you might want to try and negotiate in net 30 payment days. So this is kind of the time you would bring it up. And lastly, I think it's important to discuss right off the bat what type of marketing support they're going to be providing you, because as I've mentioned, a lot of times marketing fees will come out of your pocket and they are not going to pay to market you. So that includes everything from email marketing to in-store support to sampling. Most of the times you'll end up paying for it. So if you can get something in there where you can understand how they're going to support your launch on their end, that would be really great.
So what are the biggest misconceptions a small brand may have about working with a mass retailer?
I would say one of the big misconceptions is that working with a mass retailer is going to guarantee an increase in brand awareness and sales. So as I mentioned, a lot of retailers want to support indie brands. They want to, introduce a whole new set of products for their customers. However, they don't know how to best support indie brands. And a lot of the times their budgets are allocated to brands that are much larger and have proven sell-through with them. So you're going to have to devote a lot of time, money, and energy into promoting your brand at these retail locations. The second misconception is that orders can eventually be automated, which isn't necessarily the case. So, especially when you're drop shipping, I think there's an assumption that, eventually your 3PL or you will be able to handle these orders in an automated way where you're not checking in on a day-to-day basis. But you are always going to want to have someone on your team to monitor your retail order fulfillment, to understand if orders are going out on time, if you're getting paid on time, invoices are being sent on time. And if you end up getting a chargeback from a retailer, you want to be able to have full visibility into your order trajectories so that you can dispute it when you need to. So there's never really going to be a time where you can be fully hands-off of purchase order processing. And the last is that, there's a misconception that the only costs that will be involved in working with a retail partner is for inventory and for marketing. So you need to be aware that any returns or damages to products will also come at the cost of the brand. So if a customer returns your product to the retailer, it will be coming out of your invoice payment from the retailer. Additionally, retailers are very stringent on their pack out and their routing guides. And if you or your 3PL are not abiding by the guidelines that they've laid out in these, routing guidelines, you're going to be responsible for charges. They're going to bill you, and those are called chargebacks. So I would just be really aware that just because you submit or receive a purchase order and fulfill it, it's not necessarily going to mean that you're going to get the full value of the purchase order paid to you.
Okay. So what are the general stages of working with a retailer? What comes after you secure distribution?
So once you've met with your buyer and you have an agreement in place, and that's already, set up and done, the next stage is setup. So that's where you're going to fill out forms about your company. They might send you a link to an internal portal that they have where you would set up that information, or it could be an Excel sheet. You're going to set up all of your items. And this is also when you would set up all of your payment and your banking information so that they can pay you. Once setup is completed, they should be able to issue you a vendor number. And I advise that you save this somewhere because you're always going to have to refer to it anytime you communicate with a buyer. So once you receive a vendor number, you can then move into EDI integration. So if you don't have an EDI partner, you would go, and find that partner, secure a relationship with them, and then you would provide that EDI partner with your retail vendor number, and then they can get started on integration and testing. And I usually advise to buffer in about 4 to 6 weeks on average to complete EDI testing per retailer. It could be faster. A lot of times it's done within 2 to 4 weeks, but 4 to 6 is a general good rule of thumb to follow. While or after your EDI is set up, I would request the routing guide and any sort of transportation setup portals that you might need to get ready. from your buyer, and they might connect you to their logistics team to get that set up. And I would, I highly, highly, highly advise that you go through that entire routing guide in full depth and detail as you can, because as I mentioned also before, that you can get chargebacks if your orders are not shipped according to these guides. So get really familiar with it, pass it to your 3PL, have whoever is on your team that's handling your order fulfillment to review this guide. And then the final stage is that you're going to get your purchase order. So when the purchase order comes through via EDI, you're going to review the shipping window. So they're going to give you a ship date and then a cancel date, which is the absolute latest date that you can ship your order. And then you're going to want to ship within this time frame.
Okay, thanks. So you mentioned these two terms a couple of times, EDI and 3PL. What are they, and do I need it?
Okay, so let's start with 3PL. So 3PL stands for third-party logistics provider, or third-party logistics rather, but they're essentially third-party warehouses, distribution centers, fulfillment centers. They handle everything from e-commerce fulfillment, so they can integrate with your, Shopify example and ship out your e-commerce orders. And a lot also do B2B, so wholesale. So 3PLs tend to specialize in specific product types. So there might be 3PLs that are dedicated entirely to shipping beauty. There are 3PLs that are entirely dedicated to shipping apparel, because each product category is so unique and niche that their facilities and their staff are set up to specifically handle those types of products. And do you need to work with one? It depends on the stage of your business. So if you are working with a mass retailer, I do advise working with a 3PL, just because they are better set up with the equipment and the staff and the knowledge to be able to pack out retail orders more appropriately. They also will likely have an understanding of EDI. Sometimes their warehouse systems will also integrate with EDI as well, so they'll receive orders in automatically from your retail partners. You're going to want to select a 3PL that, one, can ship your products, two, have experience shipping to the specific retailers that you're hoping to work with in the future. So I would take that into consideration if you're trying to source a 3PL partner. And then EDI. So EDI is sort of the wild, wild west of retail. I think if you've never used it before, it sounds very intimidating and daunting, but stands for electronic data interchange, and it's a software. So it's essentially a software that allows retailers and brands to communicate with each other regarding anything with a purchase order and shipments. So this is how your retail partner is going to submit purchase orders, and then this is how you are going to tell the retailer that your order has shipped, and then invoice them for it. So all of these documents are communicated back and forth and submitted through the software. And typically they are third-party providers, and you're going to select one. I advise selecting one that is widely integrated with retailers, and then you would work with them to then integrate with your retail partners.
So how much inventory should I have stocked to support a retail partnership?
So the retailer should be able to provide a general launch forecast for you. So that'll tell you how much inventory you should have in stock to ship out your first orders. And then beyond that, they should be able to provide some sort of an annual forecast. But keep in mind that that's not going to be accurate, because you're going to be a new brand for them, and your products are going to be new to their customers. So it's hard to predict how that trajectory is going to go down the line, but they should be able to give you a general idea. And then from that point, I would try to have about 10 to 12 weeks of safety stock on hand. In the case that you do grow rapidly with them, or they do want to launch you into more channels or brick and mortar locations, you want to be able to have that inventory prepared. And the goal is to never be out of stock, and you never want to cancel a purchase order, because ultimately it could affect your sell-through rate.
Once I've shipped my first order, how can I support sell-through?
I would say the best way to support sell-through, especially if your product requires a lot of education, is through sampling. So, if you're able to support a sample program, or be able to produce additional samples along with your finished good production, I highly recommend going that route. But I do understand that it can be a very costly avenue to go down, because Retailers also will not pay for samples. That's something you would provide out of, for free to your retail partners. And then, same thing with marketing. I would try and market as much as you can with the retailer if you're able to, and set aside a budget to do that, and also promote your retail partnerships and on your social channels as well. Some retailers will also offer opportunities to provide in-store education, staff training. You're also welcome to send product to their teams as well, so that they can be educated in how to sell your product when they're on the floor. But that really depends on the retailer. Some retailers don't offer that at all. So you're going to really have to navigate it based on the retail partnership that you have. And then lastly, something I noticed happening with a couple of the brands that I work with is they'll put QR codes on their retail packaging. So that way, if, a customer is shopping in store and they see your product, they want additional information, like they can scan the code and get more info on their phone or their computer.
So should I work with a distributor or a broker? What's the difference between the two, and what do I need to consider when I'm setting up those kinds of partnerships?
Yeah, so a distributor and a broker, they both act as middlemen between you and the retailer. The difference is that a distributor is typically a company that will order the inventory from you directly, and they will be the one making payments to you. Your relationship is directly with the distribution company and not the retailer. And the retailers will then purchase your products from the distributor. A broker is more like an agency or consultant that will act as the middle person between you and the retailer and the buyer. They'll be the ones that secure the retail contract for you, handle the onboarding process and the correspondence with the buyer. But you will get your own vendor number most of the time and have your own, portal login, all of that, and handle brand setup. So the main pro is that you do get quick and easy access to these retail partnerships in, ways that maybe you might not have without these relationships. And they handle everything for you upfront. The con is that you essentially forfeit any direct access to the buyer and the retailer. So that means it's a much more complicated relationship, and it's entirely dependent on these other parties. So if it adds an additional layer of communication. You always have to go through them to get what you need, even if you have a question or you want to set up anything for marketing. If you have chargebacks or payment issues that you want to dispute or, ask them about, you have to go through these other parties to get through to the retailers.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. That's all of my questions. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to do this webinar with us, Gia. I found that really helpful and informative. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. I hope that this was educational and helpful to all the brands that are participating in this today. And I wish you success in the future.